The Alpha Council told me the weak exist to serve the strong. I was a rejected Omega, so I took in 3 homeless pups no one wanted. I fed them when I had nothing. 25 years later, when they put me on death row for a crime I didn't commit, those 3 pups came back as alphas to save me. The weak exists to serve the strong. That's the natural order. That's what the Alpha Council told Delia Sims every day of her miserable life. But Delia would learn that mercy shown to the forgotten could become the only thread between life and executioner's blade. Chapter 1. The Forgotten and the Forsaken. The rain fell in sheets that November morning, turning the pack's training grounds into a sea of mud and misery. Delia pressed herself against the storage shed's outer wall, her thin frame trembling beneath a threadbare coat that did nothing against the cold. At 19, she'd already learned that being Omega meant being invisible until someone needed a punching bag. There she is. Delia's stomach dropped. She recognized that voice. Josephine Blankenship, daughter of the Beta family, emerged from the downpour with 3 of her friends flanking her like trained hounds. Josephine's blonde hair remained pristine despite the weather, protected by an expensive, waterproof cloak that probably cost more than Dea earned in a year. "I've been looking everywhere for you, Omega." Josephine's smile was all teeth, no warmth. The Alpha's boots need polishing before the ceremony tonight, and his chambers need scrubbing again. "I cleaned them yesterday," Delia said quietly, knowing it wouldn't matter. "Are you talking back to me?" Josephine's eyes flashed amber, a warning that her wolf was close to the surface. "You forget your place." Dea lowered her gaze immediately. Eye contact was forbidden. Speaking, unless spoken to, was forbidden. Existing in spaces where higher-ranking wolves wanted to be was forbidden. The list of her crimes against the natural order grew longer every day simply because she breathed. "Forgive me," Dea whispered louder. "Let everyone hear how pathetic you are." The training grounds had gone quiet. Dozens of young wolves, all preparing for tonight's harvest moon ceremony, had stopped to watch. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked entertained. No one intervened. No one ever did. "Forgive me," Delia repeated, voice cracking. Josephine laughed a sound like breaking glass. "That's better. Now get to work." And Delia, she leaned close, breath hot against Delia's ear. "If there's a single speck of dust in those chambers, I'll make sure the Alpha knows you're being lazy again. We both know what happened last time." Delia's hand unconsciously moved to her ribs, where bruises from her last correction still bloomed purple and yellow. The pack's enforcers didn't believe in gentle lessons as Josephine and her entourage swept away. Delia allowed herself one shuddering breath before pushing off from the wall. The Alpha's chambers were in the main pack house, a sprawling mansion that sat at the territory's heart like a marble monument to hierarchy and power. She'd have to cross the entire compound to reach it. The walk was a gauntlet of humiliation. "Move." "Omega," someone snarled as she passed the combat rings. "Watch where you're going, filth." Another voice called when she skirted too close to the dining hall. A group of adolescent wolves threw mud at her back, their laughter echoing across the grounds. Delia didn't turn around. She'd learned years ago that reacting only made it worse. By the time she reached the pack house's servant entrance, she was caked in mud, shivering violently, and fighting back tears she refused to shed in public. The head housekeeper, an older wolf named Patty Mora, took one look at her and sighed. "Rough morning?" "Same as always," Delia managed. Patty handed her a clean rag and a bucket of supplies. "The Alpha wants everything perfect for tonight. Half the regional packs are attending. Don't give him any reason to notice you." Being noticed was the last thing Delia wanted. She'd spent her entire life trying to disappear into the background. To become so insignificant that the pack forgot she existed. It never worked. Omegas were too useful as outlets for everyone else's frustration. The Alpha's chambers occupied the entire 3rd floor. Delia climbed the servant stairs, her legs aching from yesterday's work, and let herself in through the side entrance. The space was already immaculate. Josephine had lied about it needing cleaning, of course. But Delia scrubbed anyway, every surface, every corner. She polished the alpha's boots until they gleamed like black mirrors, folded his ceremonial robes with precise creases, and arranged his desk exactly how he preferred. 4 hours passed before she finished. Her stomach growled. Viciously, she'd missed breakfast again. Omegas ate last, and by the time higher-ranking wolves finished, there was rarely anything left but scraps. Delia had learned to survive on very little. She was descending the stairs when she heard the voices. "Can't keep her here much longer," someone was saying. The speaker was Linwood Dalton, the pack's head enforcer. His voice carried the weight of authority and barely contained violence. "She's a liability, weak genetics. The other packs mock us for keeping an Omega this pathetic." "The Alpha's decision isn't yours to make," Patty replied, her tone carefully neutral. "The Alpha's too soft. An Omega who can't even shift properly. She should have been exiled years ago." Delia's blood ran cold. She pressed herself against the stairwell wall, hidden in shadow. "She works harder than half the pack," Patty argued quietly. "She's genetic dead weight," Linwood spat. "You know what the council says about culling weak bloodlines. It's mercy. Really, better than letting her suffer." Their voices faded as they moved away, but the words lingered like poison. Dia had always known her position was precarious. Omegas existed at the pack's mercy, but hearing her death discussed so casually made her entire body shake. She couldn't shift. That was her greatest shame. Most wolves manifested their wolf form by age 13. Delia was 19 and still entirely human. The pack healer said her wolf was dormant, but everyone knew the truth. She was defective, broken. A genetic mistake that should have been corrected long ago. Delia finished her descent and slipped out through the servants' entrance, desperate for air that didn't taste like fear. The rain had stopped, leaving the world gray and dripping. She walked without direction, feet carrying her toward the Terato's edge, where the forest grew thick and wild. That's when she heard it, a whimper, soft and scared, barely audible over the wind rustling through pine branches. Delia froze, listening there, again, coming from a drainage ditch that ran along the pack's eastern border. She approached carefully, peering into the muddy depression. What she saw made her heart clench. 3 wolf pups, soaking wet and shivering, huddled together in the filth. They couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Their eyes were barely open, their fur matted with mud and debris. One of them, the smallest, wasn't moving at all. Delia looked around. The area was deserted. These pups weren't from her pack. She knew every member's scent, and these 3 smelled like rain in desperation. And nothing else. Rogues, probably. Their mother must have died or abandoned them. The sensible thing would be to walk away. The pack had strict rules about rogues. Bringing them into the territory was forbidden. Harboring them was punishable by exile or worse. The largest pup whimpered again, its dark eyes finding hers. It wasn't begging. It was simply looking, acknowledging her presence, seeing her the way no one in the pack ever truly saw her. Dia made a decision that would change everything. She removed her coat, the only warm thing she owned, and carefully lifted each pup, wrapping them in the threadbare fabric. They were so small they fit together in her arms like puzzle pieces. The smallest one stirred slightly, its heartbeat fragile but present. "I've got you," Delia whispered. "I've got you." She couldn't take them to the pack house, couldn't risk anyone discovering them. But there was another option, a place no one visited because it was too far from the compound's center and too close to the Terato's edge. The old groundskeeper's cottage had been abandoned for 5 years. Ever since its last occupant died, Dia had discovered it during one of her many attempts to find spaces where she could be alone. The roof leaked, the windows were cracked, and the floorboards groaned. But it was shelter. It was safe. She hurried through the forest, the pups' combined weight barely registering. Her arms knew how to carry burdens much heavier than this. The cottage appeared through the trees like a memory made solid. Dia shouldered open the door and stepped into the musty darkness. She'd stashed a few supplies here over the years, blankets she'd salvaged, candles she'd stolen, a small cooking pot she'd found in the Packus's storage room. She laid the pups on the cleanest blanket and lit a candle, examining them in the flickering light. 2 males and 1 female. The males were dark-furred, almost black. The female was lighter, her coat the color of autumn leaves. All 3 were severely undernourished, their ribs visible beneath their thin fur. The smallest male, the one who'd barely been breathing, opened his eyes and looked at her. There was something ancient in that gaze, something that made Delia feel like she was being evaluated and found worthy. "You're going to be okay," she told them, hoping it was true. "All of you." She had no idea how to care for wolf pups, had no resources, no money, no support. But she knew what it felt like to be abandoned, to be considered worthless, to exist at the mercy of a world that wanted you gone. She couldn't save herself, but maybe, just maybe, she could save them. Chapter 2. The Secret Family. Dia spent that first night in the cottage watching the pups breathe. She'd torn her only spare shirt into strips to make a nest for them, layering the fabric inside a wooden crate she'd found in the corner. Every few hours, one of them would whimper, and she'd stroke their tiny heads until they settled. The problem was food. Wolf pups needed milk-rich, nourishing milk their bodies could digest. Delia had nothing. The pack's kitchens were locked at night, guarded by wolves who'd report her instantly if they caught her stealing, even if she could get past them. Taking enough milk to feed 3 growing pups without being noticed was impossible. As dawn broke, painting the cottage's cracked windows with pale gold light, Delia made another dangerous decision. She'd have to use her own rations. Omegas received minimal food allowances, barely enough to sustain 1 person, let alone 1 person and 3 hungry pups. But Delia had survived on less. She could make it work. She had to. She left the pups sleeping and hurried back to the pack house before the morning bell. Her absence would be noticed if she wasn't in the servant quarters when assignments were distributed. The head housekeeper, Patty, gave her a searching look when she arrived, breathless and disheveled. "You look terrible," Patty said bluntly. "Worse than usual." "Didn't sleep well," Delia mumbled, which was true. "Well, pull yourself together. The Alpha wants the entire West Wing clean today. The visiting packs made a mess last night, and he's in a foul mood." Delia's heart sank. The West Wing was enormous. Dozens of guest suites, 3 ballrooms, and countless sitting rooms. It would take all day, maybe longer, but she couldn't object. Objecting meant punishment. "Yes, ma'ams," she said quietly. The work was as brutal as expected. Delia scrubbed floors until her knees bled through her threadbare pants, polished silver until her hands cramped, and hauled bags of soiled linens down 4 flights of stairs because the service elevator was broken and no one cared enough to fix it for the Omega's convenience. By the time evening arrived, she could barely stand. But she'd managed to pocket half a loaf of bread, a chunk of cheese that someone had left on a breakfast tray, and most precious of all, a small bottle of milk from the kitchens when the cooks weren't looking. It wasn't much. It would never be enough. But it was something. She returned to the cottage after dark, her body screaming for rest. The pups were awake, mewing pitifully. They hadn't eaten in over 24 hours. Delia warmed the milk over a candle flame, testing the temperature on her wrist like she'd seen the pack mothers do with their own pups. When it was lukewarm, she dipped a clean cloth into the liquid and held it to the smallest male's mouth. He latched on immediately, sucking desperately. Relief flooded through her. She fed each pup in turn, rationing the milk carefully. It wasn't enough. They were still hungry when the bottle ran dry, but their whimpering quieted. They curled together in their makeshift nest, bellies slightly fuller, and slept. Delia allowed herself a small smile, her first victory. The pattern continued for weeks. She worked herself to exhaustion during the day, stealing scraps whenever possible, and spent her nights in the cottage, caring for the pups. She learned their personalities quickly, the largest male. She started calling him Dusty in her mind, after his dark, dust-cold fur was bold and protective, always positioning himself between his siblings and the door. The female Morgan, for her bright morning-colored coat, was curious and intelligent, her eyes tracking Delia's every movement. And the smallest male, Gabriel, was gentle and observant, the one who always seemed to understand when Delia was at her breaking point. They grew stronger slowly, painfully slowly. But they grew. Delia grew weaker. She was giving them most of her food, surviving on whatever they didn't finish, and the occasional vegetable she could scavenge from the pack's garden. Her clothes hung looser, her face became gaunt. The other wolves noticed. "You look like death," Josephine commented one morning, wrinkling her nose in disgust, even more pathetic than usual. "Are you sick?" "No," Delia lied. "Well, you smell worse. Stay away from me." Dia was grateful for the dismissal. She couldn't afford questions, couldn't afford anyone paying too much attention, but someone was paying attention. Patty cornered her in the storage room 3 weeks after Delia had found the pups. The older woman's face was carved with worry lines that seemed deeper than usual. "What's going on with you?" Patty demanded, closing the door behind her. "Nothing. I'm fine. Don't lie to me, girl. You're wasting away. You're exhausted. And yesterday, I caught you pocketing food." Patty held up a hand when Delia started to protest. "I didn't report it, but I need to know." "What are you doing?" Delia's mind raced. She couldn't tell the truth. If Patty knew about the pups, she'd be obligated to report them. The pack's laws were absolute. "I'm just hungry," Delia said, finally. "The rations aren't enough." Patty studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she reached into her apron and pulled out a wrapped package. "Here, leftover roast from the Alpha's dinner. Hide it better next time." Delia stared at the package, throat tight. Kindness was so rare she'd almost forgotten what it felt like. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me. Just be careful, Dia. Whatever you're doing, be careful. The enforcers are watching you more closely lately." Linwood asked me yesterday if he'd been acting strange. Ice flooded Delia's veins. "What did you tell him?" "That you're always strange because you're Omega," Patty said bluntly. "But he's suspicious. Watch yourself." The warning haunted Dia for days. She became even more cautious, varying her routes to the cottage, never visiting at the same time twice, covering her tracks obsessively. The pups were growing fast, now almost 5 weeks old. Their eyes were fully open, their movements more coordinated. Soon they'd start trying to walk. Soon they'd need more than milk and scraps. Delia was collecting firewood near the cottage one evening when she heard voices approaching through the forest. She dropped the wood and pressed herself behind a thick oak tree, heart hammering. Around here, somewhere, someone was saying Linwood. Of course it was Linwood. The scouts reported unusual scents near the eastern border. Could be rogues passing through. Another enforcer replied. Could be, or could be someone harboring rogues. You know the punishment for that death. The other enforcer said simply immediate execution. They were close now, maybe 30 yards from the cottage. If they investigated, if they found the pups, Delia made a split-second decision. She grabbed a fallen branch and deliberately stepped on it, creating a loud crack. Then she stumbled out from behind the tree, making herself visible. "Who's there?" Linwood barked, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. "It's just me," Delia called out, trying to sound startled. "I was collecting firewood." Linwood's eyes narrowed as he approached. The Omega, "What are you doing this far from the compound?" "I needed firewood for the Alpha's chambers." She lied, praying he wouldn't smell her fear. The supply ran out. There's firewood stored behind the pack house, Linwood said slowly. Why come all the way out here? I didn't know. I'm sorry. I'll go back. She started to turn, but Linwood grabbed her arm. His grip was bruising, his claws extending slightly to press against her skin. You're hiding something, he said softly. I can smell it on you, lies and secrets. Delia forced herself to meet his eyes, even though it made her dormant, useless wolf whimper in submission. I'm not hiding anything. Please let me go. I have work to do. For a terrible moment, she thought he'd drag her to the cottage. Thought he'd discover everything, and she'd watch those 3 innocent pups die because of her stupid, reckless mercy. But then a howl split the air, the alpha summons. All pack members were required to respond immediately. Linwood released her with obvious reluctance. This conversation isn't over, Omega. I'm watching you. He and the other enforcer loped away toward the compound, shifting mid-stride into their powerful wolf forms. Delia waited until their sense faded completely before allowing her legs to collapse beneath her. That had been too close. She returned to the cottage with shaking hands. The pup sensed her distress immediately, whining and pressing against her legs when she entered. They were getting big. Gabriel was almost the size of a small dog now. His siblings even larger. We can't stay here much longer, Delia told them, stroking Morgan's russet fur. They're getting suspicious if they catch us. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The pups looked at her with understanding far beyond their age, and Delia wondered not for the first time what she'd really saved from that drainage ditch. These weren't normal wolf pups. The way they watched her, the intelligence in their eyes, the speed of their growth, something was different about them, something powerful. But power wouldn't save them if the pack discovered their existence. Delia needed a plan, needed a way to keep them safe until they were strong enough to survive on their own. She just had no idea what that plan could possibly be. Outside the cottage, the wind picked up, carrying the distant sounds of the pack's nightly gathering. Somewhere in that crowd of wolves, Linwood was watching, waiting, searching for any excuse to prove she was breaking the laws. And Delia knew with absolute certainty that he'd find one eventually. The only question was whether she could save the pups before he did. Chapter 3. The First Shift. 2 months after finding the pups, everything changed. Delia was in the Packus's kitchen scrubbing pots from the evening meal when the pain hit. It started in her spine, a burning sensation that spread through her entire body like wildfire. She gasped, dropping the pot with a clatter that made the head coo glare at her. Clumsy Omega, you'll pay for that if it's damaged. But Delia couldn't respond, couldn't breathe. Her bones felt like they were rearranging themselves. Her muscles screaming as something inside her, something that had been dormant for 19 years, suddenly woke up. What's wrong with her? Someone asked from far away. She's shifting, another voice said, filled with shock. The Omega is shifting. Impossible. Delia had tried to shift 1,000 times, had stood in the forests during full moons, begging her wolf to emerge, only to remain frustratingly human. The pack healers had declared her wolf dead or non-existent, but now, as her vision blurred and her body convulsed, she felt it, her wolf. Not dead, not gone, just waiting. The transformation was agony. Her first shift was supposed to have happened years ago when her body was prepared for it. At 19, fighting through a shift without any training or guidance, Dia thought she might die from the pain alone. When it finally ended, she found herself on 4 legs, panting and disoriented. The kitchen had gone completely silent. Every wolf present stared at her with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Her wolf was small, smaller than any adult wolf should be. Her fur was dull gray, unremarkable. She could feel her own weakness in every muscle, every bone. Even in wolf form, she was pathetic. I don't believe it, the head cook muttered. 19 years old, and that's the best she can do. Laughter rippled through the kitchen. Cruel, mocking laughter that followed Delia as she scrambled on unfamiliar legs toward the exit. She crashed into a table, knocked over a chair, and finally burst through the door into the night. She ran. Her wolf form was clumsy and uncoordinated, nothing like the graceful power of other pack wolves. But she ran anyway, instinct driving her toward the one place she felt safe, the cottage. The pups were waiting when she arrived. And the moment she crossed the threshold, something extraordinary happened. Gabriel, the smallest pup who'd barely been breathing when she found him, stood up on shaking legs. His body began to glow with a soft golden light. Then Morgan and Dusty rose as well, their bodies emanating the same ethereal radiance. Delia shifted back to human form without meaning to, collapsing naked and exhausted on the floor. The pups approached her, still glowing, and pressed their tiny noses to her skin. Warmth flooded through her, not the burning pain of the shift, but something else. Something ancient and powerful and utterly foreign. She felt her wolf strengthen inside her, felt connections forming that shouldn't exist between a wolf and 3 pups she'd found in a ditch. When the glowing faded, Delia understood, with perfect clarity, what had happened. The pups weren't normal wolves. They were something far older, far more powerful. And by saving them, by feeding them with her own blood and sacrifice, she'd bonded with them in a way that transcended normal pack bonds. They'd awakened her wolf, had given her what the pack said she'd never have. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you." Gabriel licked her cheek, his dark eyes filled with affection. Morgan curled against her side. Dusty positioned himself at the door, already protective, already standing guard. For the first time in her life, Dia didn't feel alone. But her newfound happiness lasted exactly 3 days. She was carrying water from the well when Josephine intercepted her, flanked by 2 other high-ranking wolves. The beta's daughter wore an expression of vicious delight. So, the Omega finally got her wolf. Josephine said sweetly, "How pathetic it is. I've seen pups with more presence." Dia kept her head down, trying to pass, but Josephine stepped into her path. "I heard something interesting today," Josephine continued. "Some of the scouts have been reporting strange scents near the eastern border. Young wolves, unfamiliar ones." Her smile widened. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Delia's blood turned to ice. "No, really, because Linwood is convinced someone's been harboring rogues. And you've been acting very suspicious lately. Always tired, always stealing food, disappearing for hours at a time. I haven't done anything wrong." "Then you won't mind if we search your belongings, your sleeping quarters." Josephine leaned close. "Or maybe that little cottage you've been sneaking off to." The world tilted. They knew. Somehow they knew. "I don't know what you're talking about," Delia said. But her voice betrayed her. Josephine laughed. "You're a terrible liar, Omega." "Linwood," she called out. "I think we should investigate the old groundskeeper's cottage." Right now, 3 enforcers materialized from the shadows, Linwood at their head. His expression was triumphant. "Lead the way, Omega," he ordered. "Or we'll track you there. Your choice." Dia's mind raced frantically. If she ran to the cottage, she'd lead them straight to the pups. If she refused, they'd search anyway and find them. There was no way out, no escape. She'd failed them. Actually, a new voice interrupted. "I need the Omega for a task." Everyone turned. Patty stood there, her arms crossed, her expression stern. The Alpha specifically requested her for the evening meal preparation. "She's already late. This takes precedence," Linwood said dismissively. "Does it?" Patty raised an eyebrow. "You want to explain to the Alpha why his dinner is delayed. Because you were chasing shadows based on Josephine's gossip." Linwood's jaw tightened. The Alpha's temper was legendary, and his dinner schedule was sacrosanct. "Fine, but this is only a delay. Omega, we'll be visiting that cottage tonight with or without you." They dispersed, Josephine shooting Delia a poisonous glare before following Linwood. Patty grabbed Delia's arm and hauled her toward the pack house. You have 2 hours, Patty hissed once they were alone. Whatever you're hiding, you need to move it or destroy it. 2 hours, Delia. That's all I can give you. Why are you helping me? Patty's expression softened slightly. Because I was Omega once, before I got too old to be useful for anything but housekeeping. I know what it's like now. Go run. Delia ran. She burst into the cottage, breathless and panicking. The pups were bigger now, almost adolescent size. They sensed her fear immediately, hackles rising. We have to leave, Delia told them. Now they know about you. They're coming. But where could they go? The pack's territory stretched for miles in every direction. Beyond it was wilderness, dangerous territory filled with rogues, predators, and worse. The pups were strong, but they weren't ready to survive on their own. Gabriel approached her, his dark eyes calm despite the chaos. He pressed his head against her palm, and suddenly, images flooded her mind. A cave deep in the mountains at the Territo's northern edge, hidden, safe, protected by ancient magic that would keep outsiders away. How do you, Delia started, then stopped. It didn't matter how Gabriel knew. What mattered was that he was showing her a way out. She gathered what few supplies she had, blankets, her extra clothes, the last of the food. The pups circled her anxiously as she worked, their previous playfulness replaced by deadly seriousness. They left just as twilight fell, slipping into the forest like ghosts. Delia's wolf was still clumsy, still weak, but adrenaline kept her moving. The pups ranged around her protectively, Dusty taking point, Morgan covering the rear, Gabriel staying close to Delia's side. They moved through the darkness for hours. Every snap of a twig made Delia's heart race. Every rustle in the underbrush could be an enforcer tracking them. Behind them, she heard howls rising into the night sky. The hunt had begun. Faster, Delia urged, though her legs were already burning. We have to move faster. The pups shifted formation, and suddenly, Dusty was beside her, pressing against her leg. He was big enough now that she could drape herself across his back. Without hesitation, she did, and he surged forward with Morgan and Gabriel flanking him. They ran as one, faster than Dia could have ever moved alone. The forest blurred past. The howls grew more distant. By the time they reached the mountain's base, dawn was breaking. Delia could barely keep her eyes open. Her body pushed far beyond its limits, but Gabriel was already leading them upward, following a path invisible to Delia's eyes. The cave he'd shown her was real. It was hidden behind a waterfall, accessible only through a narrow passage that required them to squeeze through one at a time. Inside, it opened into a space large enough for all 4 of them. With a natural spring in the corner and moss-covered stone that would make decent bedding, Delia collapsed the moment they were inside. The pups curled around her, their combined warmth keeping the mountain cold at bay. We made it, she whispered. We actually made it. But even as exhaustion dragged her toward sleep, she knew the truth: they'd escaped tonight. But the pack would keep looking. Linwood wouldn't rest until he found them, and made an example of the Omega who dared to break their most sacred law. This wasn't over. It was only beginning. Chapter 4. Sentenced without trial. The cave became their sanctuary and their prison. For 3 weeks, Delia and the pups lived in the mountain's heart, venturing out only when absolutely necessary. They survived on wild berries, fish from the stream that fed the waterfall, and whatever small game the pups could catch. Delia's body grew leaner, harder. Her wolf grew stronger with each shift, as if the freedom from the pack's oppression allowed her to finally become what she was meant to be. The pups thrived. They were nearly full-grown now, their true nature becoming impossible to ignore. When they ran, their paws left faint traces of golden light. When they hunted, they moved with coordination that bordered on supernatural. And at night, when they slept in a pile with Delia at the center, she sometimes dreamed of their dreams, visions of ancient forests, of wolves that walked between worlds, of power that predated the modern packs by millennia. She'd saved something far more significant than 3 abandoned pups. She just didn't know what yet. On the 23rd day of their exile, Gabriel woke her before dawn. His dark eyes were urgent, his body tense. Through their bond, Delia felt his warning. Someone was coming. She rose quietly, waking Morgan and Dusty. The 3 pups positioned themselves between Delia and the cave entrance, their lips curled back to reveal teeth that had grown sharp and deadly. Footsteps echoed from beyond the waterfall. Not the heavy tread of enforcers, but something lighter, familiar. Patty stepped through the cascade of water, drenched and breathing hard. She froze when she saw the pups, her eyes widening. "Blessed moon," she whispered. "What are they? Please don't tell the pack," Dia begged, stepping forward. "Please, I know I broke the law, but they would have died. I'm not here to turn you in, girl." Patty's gaze moved from the pups to Delia, and her expression softened with something that might have been respect. "I'm here to warn you. The Alphas called a tribunal. They've declared you a rogue for abandoning your duties and stealing pack resources. I didn't abandon anything. They were going to kill me. I know, but the tribunal's in 3 days, and they've already decided your sentence, death. Linwood's been given permission to hunt you down and execute you on sight." Patty reached into her coat and pulled out a wrapped bundle. "I brought supplies, food, medicine, blankets." "It's not much, but why are you helping me?" Delia interrupted. "You could be exiled for this or worse." Patty was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, 20 years ago, I was Omega, like you, and I got pregnant by a wolf who wanted nothing to do with me or the baby. The pack wanted me to terminate the pregnancy, said an Omega's bloodline wasn't worth continuing." Her voice cracked. "I ran, tried to hide, but they found me, and they made me end it. Held me down while the healer did what the Alpha commanded." Tears streamed down the older woman's weathered face. "I never forgave myself for not fighting harder, for not running farther. So when I see you, a girl who's been beaten down her entire life, choosing to protect 3 lives, even though it might cost you everything," she wiped her eyes roughly. "I won't let you face this alone. Not like I did." Delia's throat tightened. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Listen carefully. The tribunal's a formality. The real danger is Linwood and his hunters. They'll come for you with everything they have." Patty glanced at the pups, who were still watching her with unnerving intensity. "Those 3 aren't normal wolves. Any fool can see that. Whatever they are, they're your only advantage." "I don't want to fight the pack," Dia said softly. "I just want to be left alone. The world doesn't work that way, child. Especially not for Omegas." Patty squeezed Dia's shoulder. "But maybe with those 3 at your side, you can survive what's coming. Maybe you can be what I couldn't free." After Patty left, Delia sat with the pups and tried to form a plan. She had no pack, no allies, no resources beyond what Patty had brought. The smart thing would be to run as far from this territory as possible, find some remote corner of the wilderness where the pack's reach didn't extend. But Gabriel had other ideas. He approached her with something in his mouth, a piece of bark with symbols carved into it, old symbols. Delia recognized them from the pack's historical texts, the ones kept locked in the Alpha's study. Ancient wolf language, the kind used by the first packs. "Where did you find this?" she asked. Gabriel dropped the bark and pressed his nose to her hand. Images flooded her mind again, but clearer now, stronger. She saw the cave system extending deep into the mountain, saw chambers filled with ancient artifacts, saw a stone altar inscribed with the same symbols, saw a prophecy carved into living rock. When the forgotten rise and the rejected show mercy, 3 guardians shall wake from their slumber. They will bond with the one whose wolf sleeps in shadow, and together they will restore balance to the broken packs. "You're the guardians," Delia breathed. "The prophecy is about you." Dusty huffed agreement or acknowledgement. She couldn't tell. Morgan circled her, tail wagging slightly. Gabriel simply watched with those impossibly intelligent eyes. "But I'm nobody," Delia protested. I'm just an omega. I can't restore balance to anything. Yet, even as she said it, she felt the wrongness of the words. She'd been told her entire life that she was worthless, broken, less than. But the pups didn't see her that way. When they looked at her, they saw something the pack had deliberately blinded themselves to. They saw potential. The tribunal took place at dusk. 3 days later, just as Patty had warned. Delia watched from a distant ridge, hidden among the trees as the entire pack gathered in the ceremonial circle. The alpha, a massive gray wolf named Quentin Carlson, stood at the center, his authority radiating outward like heat from a forge. Beside him stood Linwood, Josephine, and the pack's council members. They directed a wooden frame in the circle's center. Delia's stomach churned as she realized what it was for. An execution post. Delia Sims. The alpha's voice boomed across the territory, amplified by power that made even the trees seem to lean away. You have been summoned to answer for your crimes. Abandonment of duties, theft of pack resources, harboring of rogue wolves, each offense punishable by death. Silence. Delia remained hidden, her heart hammering. She's not coming, Josephine said with satisfaction. She knows she's guilty. Then we proceed with judgment and absentia, the alpha declared. By the ancient laws and the authority vested in me, I declare Dia Sims rogue. She is expelled from this pack and marked for death. Any wolf who encounters her is authorized to kill on sight. Her bloodline is ended. Her name is struck from our records. She no longer exists. The pack howled, a terrible unified sound that spoke of judgment and finality. Delia felt something inside her sever. The pack bond, weak as it had always been for her, snapped completely. She gasped at the sudden emptiness, the loss of connection to the only family she'd ever known, however cruel they'd been. Linwood, the alpha continued. Take your best hunters. Find the rogue. Bring me proof of her death within the week, or face consequences yourself. It will be my pleasure, Alpha, Linwood said, his voice carrying predatory excitement. Dia retreated into the forest, her body shaking. She was truly alone now, truly exiled. The pack that had abused her for 19 years had officially cast her out, and now they'd hunt her like an animal. She made it halfway back to the cave before breaking down, collapsing against a tree as sobs tore through her chest. Every terrible thing they'd ever said about her echoed in her mind. Worthless, defective, better off dead. Warm bodies pressed against her from 3 sides. The pups, no, not pups anymore. They were nearly adult size now, their presence solid and reassuring. Gabriel rested his head on her lap. Morgan leaned into her side. Dusty positioned himself in front of her, facing outward, always protecting. I'm sorry, Delia whispered to them. I'm sorry. I'm not stronger, not better. You deserve someone worthy of that prophecy. Gabriel made a sound, not quite a whine, not quite a growl. Through their bond, she felt his response as clearly as spoken words. You are worthy. You saved us when you had nothing. You protected us when it meant losing everything. That is strength. They're right about me, Delia insisted, tears streaming. I'm weak. My wolf is pathetic. I can't even shift properly half the time. How am I supposed to restore balance to anything when I can't even survive on my own? Morgan nipped her hand gently, demanding attention. When Delia looked into her bright eyes, she saw reflected back something she'd never seen before. Herself, as the pups saw her, not an omega, not a worthless reject, but someone who'd chosen kindness when cruelty would have been easier. Someone who'd sacrificed everything to save 3 lives she'd had no obligation to protect. Someone who'd shown them what pack was supposed to mean. We teach you, Dusty's presence seemed to say, though he made no sound. We make you strong and standing there in the forest with 3 ancient guardians pressed against her. Delia made a choice. She could run, could spend the rest of her life hiding from Linwood and his hunters, waiting for the inevitable moment when they found her, or she could become something the pack had never allowed her to be. Someone who fought back. Chapter 5. When prey becomes predator, the training began at dawn. Delia had always been weak, or so she'd been told. Her wolf was small, her shifts clumsy, her instincts suppressed by years of abuse and conditioning, but the Guardian saw past all of that to something deeper, something the pack had deliberately tried to destroy. They saw her potential. Gabriel started with the basics. He'd circle her in the clearing near the cave, moving with fluid grace, and she was meant to track him. Not with her eyes. Those were too slow, too limited. But with her other senses, her wolf's senses. The first dozen attempts were humiliating. Gabriel moved and Delia spun in circles trying to follow, always 3 steps behind. But he was patient in a way no pack trainer had ever been. When she failed, he'd simply return to the starting position and begin again. Morgan worked on her shifting. The transitions between human and wolf form had always been agonizing for Delia, taking several minutes of painful transformation. Morgan taught her to embrace the change rather than fight it, to let her wolf flow forward instead of forcing it. "It hurts!" Delia gasped after her 5th shift of the morning, collapsing on the moss-covered ground. Morgan pressed close, and warmth flooded through their bond. Not the burning pain of transformation, but something soothing, healing. When Morgan pulled away, the ache in Delia's bones had diminished to a dull throb. Dusty's lessons were the hardest. He taught her to fight. Delia had never fought back in her life. Fighting meant punishment. Fighting meant being held down by enforcers while they corrected her behavior. Every instinct screamed at her to submit, to lower her eyes, to expose her throat in surrender. Dusty wouldn't allow it. He'd attack, never enough to truly hurt, but enough to force a response. And when Dia instinctively dropped into submission, he'd stop and wait. They'd start again and again and again. "I can't," Delia finally sobbed after the 20th attempt. "I can't fight. It's not in me," Dusty growled, not in anger but in frustration. He shifted his position. And suddenly, he wasn't attacking her anymore. He was showing her memories through their bond. She saw herself as he'd first seen her, a figure emerging through the rain, thin and trembling, moving toward the drainage ditch where 3 dying pups lay. Saw herself removing her only coat, the only warm thing she owned, to wrap them in it. Saw herself carry them to safety. Even though her arms shook with exhaustion, saw herself return night after night, giving them her food when she was starving, protecting them when discovery meant death. "That's different," Delia protested. "That was just I couldn't leave you there." Dusty's response came through their bond with crystal clarity. That was fighting. Fighting is not just claws and teeth. Fighting is choosing to act when surrender is easier. "You have been fighting your entire life." The words hit her like a physical blow. She'd never thought of it that way, had never considered that survival itself was a form of resistance, that choosing kindness in a world determined to crush her was its own kind of warfare. "Show me," she whispered. "Show me how to fight." Dusty's eyes gleamed with approval. He lunged again, but this time when Delia's instinct screamed at her to submit. She thought of the 3 pups curled in the drainage ditch. Thought of the choice she'd made that day. Thought of every moment since when she'd chosen them over her own safety. She dodged. It wasn't graceful. She stumbled and nearly fell, but she moved instead of surrendering, and that made all the difference. They trained for 6 days straight. 6 days of pushing her body and wolf to limits she'd never imagined. 6 days of falling and rising and falling again. And slowly, painfully, Delia began to change. Her shifts became faster, smoother. Her wolf form, while still smaller than other pack wolves, moved with new confidence. Her senses sharpened until she could track. Gabriel blindfolded. Could smell the difference between morning dew and afternoon rain. Could hear a rabbit's heartbeat from 100 yards away. She was still nowhere near as strong as a trained pack warrior, but she was stronger than she'd ever been. On the 7th day, Linwood's hunters found them. Delia was fishing in the stream when Gabriel's warning shot through their bond. She dropped the fish and shifted mid-stride, racing back toward the cave. Morgan and Dusty were already there, positioned defensively at the entrance. 5 wolves emerged from the treeing. Linwood led them, his massive brown form radiating menace. The other 4 were enforcers Dia recognized warriors who'd participated in her corrections over the years. There she is. Linwood snarled, his voice distorted by his wolf form. The rogue Omega who thinks she's too good for pack justice. Dia's first instinct was to run, to hide, to submit and beg for mercy she knew she'd never receive. But then she felt the Guardian's presence at her back, felt their absolute certainty that she was worth protecting, and something inside her solidified. "I'm not going back," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Lynn would laugh, a horrible sound coming from a wolf's throat. "You think you have a choice? You're rogue, you're prey, and we're going to drag your corpse back to the Alpha as proof that the natural order still stands." Natural order? Delia felt anger rising. Real anger, not the suppressed frustration she'd lived with for years. "You mean the order where Omegas are beaten and starved? Where showing mercy is punishable by death? That's not natural. That's tyranny." Bold words from a worthless runt. Linwood took a step forward. "But words won't save you. Nothing will." He lunged. Delia's training took over. She dodged left, using her smaller size to her advantage. Linwood's jaws snapped shut on empty air. Before he could recover, Dusty slammed into him from the side, his larger form sending the enforcer tumbling. The other 4 hunters attacked simultaneously. Morgan intercepted 2 of them, her autumn-colored fur blazing with that strange golden light. Gabriel moved like smoke, harrying a 3rd hunter, never letting him get close to Delia. But the 4th hunter, a scarred female named Tamika Aosta, broke through. She was fast, experienced, and she'd always particularly enjoyed Delia's punishments. Her teeth found Delia's shoulder, tearing through fur and flesh. Pain exploded through Delia's body. Old instincts screamed at her to submit, to go limp, to let the stronger wolf have her way. Instead, Delia thought of 3 dying pups in a drainage ditch. Thought of every night she'd given them her food while her own stomach cramped with hunger. Thought of the choice she'd made to protect them, even when it cost her everything. She twisted into Tika's grip and sank her teeth into the enforcer's throat. Not deep enough to kill, she couldn't bring herself to do that, but deep enough to make Tamika release her with a yelp of shock. "She bit me." Tamika sounded outraged. "The Omega actually bit me." "Good," Dia growled, blood from her shoulder wound dripping onto the moss. "Maybe you'll think twice before attacking someone next time." The fight was chaos. The Guardians moved with supernatural coordination, always positioning themselves to protect Delia while driving back the hunters. They didn't kill. They didn't need to. Their very presence was overwhelming, their power making even experienced warriors hesitate. Linwood was the last to retreat. He stood at the clearing's edge, blood matting his fur from where Dusty had clawed him. His eyes burned with hatred. "This is an over-rogue," he snarled. "The Alpha will hear about this, about you and those things you're harboring. Hell come himself if he has to." "Let him come," Delia said, and meant it. "I'm done running." The hunters disappeared into the forest, their retreat marked by broken branches and the smell of fear. Delia's legs gave out the moment they were gone, adrenaline abandoning her all at once. She shifted back to human form, her shoulder wound bleeding freely. Morgan was there immediately, licking the injury with her rough tongue. The same warm, healing energy that had soothed shifting pains flooded through the wound. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. When Morgan pulled away, only a pink scar remained. "You can heal," Delia breathed. "Morgan, you can actually heal." The Guardian's bright eyes sparkled with what might have been amusement, as if to say, "We can do many things. You're only beginning to see." Gabriel and Dusty returned from scouting the perimeter. Through their bond, Delia felt their assessment. The hunters were gone, but they'd be back with more warriors, maybe with the Alpha himself. "We need to move," Delia said, forcing herself to stand despite her exhaustion. "This location's compromised." But Gabriel shook his head. Through their bond, he showed her something that made her breath catch. Deep in the mountain in the chambers, he's discovered there were defenses, ancient protections carved by the first wolves, designed to keep out those with violent intent. The cave could become a fortress if they activated the old magic. "How?" Delia asked. Gabriel's response came with images, the stone altar she'd seen in his earlier visions. Herself standing before it, her blood on the ancient carvings, speaking words in the old language, a ritual, a claiming, a declaration that this place, this sanctuary, belonged to her and her pack, her pack. The words felt strange, wrong. She'd never had a pack, not really. The wolves who'd raised her had never been family, only captors. But these three guardians, they were pack in the truest sense, protected her, taught her, stayed with her even when leaving would have been safer. "All right," Delia said quietly. "Show me what to do." They descended into the mountain's heart as night fell above. The passages twisted deeper than Delia had explored, opening eventually into a vast chamber lit by some phosphorescent fungi that grew in patterns along the walls. At the center stood the altar Gabriel had shown her, a massive stone carved with symbols that seemed to shift and writhe in the dim light. Delia approached it reverently. The air here felt thick with power, with history, with the weight of thousands of years. "What do I say?" she asked. Gabriel pressed his nose to her hand, and the words filled her mind. Ancient words, powerful words. Words that would bind this place to her spirit, and declare to any who entered that she was not prey. She was predator. She was pack. She was home. Delia cut her palm on a sharp edge of the altar and pressed her bleeding hand to the stone. The symbols flared to life, glowing with the same golden light that sometimes surrounded the guardians. Then she spoke the words Gabriel had given her, and the mountain itself seemed to listen. Chapter 6. Standing Ground. The ritual changed everything. When Delia spoke the final word and removed her bloodied hand from the altar, she felt the mountain accept her. Not just the cave they'd been sheltering in, but the entire peak miles of stone and earth and ancient power recognized her as its guardian. The connection settled into her bones like a second heartbeat, steady and unbreakable. She could feel everything. The deer browsing on the southern slope, the eagle nesting near the summit, the stream that fed the waterfall, tracing its underground course through chambers she'd never seen. And most importantly, she could feel intruders the moment they set foot on her territory. The guardians stood with her before the altar, their golden light pulsing in rhythm with the symbols carved into stone. Through their bond, Delia understood what they'd done. They hadn't just given her a fortress. They'd given her legitimacy. In the old ways, the ways that predated modern pack politics, claiming territory through ritual was how new packs formed. By speaking the ancient words and marking the land with her blood, Delia had declared herself alpha of her own pack, a pack of one human girl and 3 supernatural guardians, but a pack nonetheless. It should have been laughable, pathetic. The Omega, who couldn't even shift properly, claiming to be alpha. But the mountain didn't laugh. The ancient magic didn't mock. They simply acknowledged what was true. She'd survived what should have killed her, protected those weaker than herself, and stood her ground when warriors came to end her life. That was more alpha than most who claimed the title. "They're going to come back," Delia said softly, her voice echoing through the chamber. With everything they have, Dusty's agreement rumbled through their bond, but alongside it came something else. Readiness. The Guardians weren't afraid of Quentin Carlson's pack. They'd been waiting for this confrontation since the moment Delia pulled them from that drainage ditch. Delia spent the next 3 days preparing. She explored every passage the mountain revealed to her through their new bond, memorizing escape routes and defensive positions. She hunted and preserved meat, built up supplies, gathered herbs that Morgan indicated had healing properties, and she trained. Every moment she wasn't eating or sleeping, she trained with the Guardians. Her shifts became so fluid she could transition mid-leap. Her senses sharpened until she could identify individual wolves by scent alone from half a mile away. Her fighting improved from barely competent to might survive a real battle. She'd never be the strongest wolf, but she was learning to be the smartest. On the 4th day after the ritual, the alpha came. Delia felt him the moment his paw touched her mountain. The sensation was like ice water down her spine, pure concentrated dominance radiating from a wolf who'd ruled his pack for 15 years without challenge. Quentin Carlson wasn't just strong, he was power made flesh. And he'd come to remind the rogue Omega of her place. He brought 40 wolves with him. Dia watched from a high ridge as they assembled in the valley below her cave, a sea of fur and fang that represented the full might of the pack she'd once belonged to. Warriors, hunters, trackers, all of them loyal to the Alpha, who'd given them purpose and status. Among them, she spotted Josephine and Linwood, both looking smug. They thought this would be a slaughter, a quick lesson in what happened to those who defied the natural order. The Alpha himself was massive, a gray wolf easily twice Dia's size in her wolf form. Even from a distance, she could see the intelligence in his eyes. Quentin wasn't like Linwood, who ruled through brutality and fear. The Alpha was calculating, strategic, and absolutely certain of his superiority. Delia Sims, his voice boomed across the valley, amplified by the same power he'd used during her tribunal. Show yourself. Face justice for your crimes. For a moment, Delia considered staying hidden. Let them exhaust themselves searching. Use the mountain's defenses to pick them off one by one. But Gabriel pressed against her side, his dark eyes steady. Through their bond, she felt his counsel. This isn't about winning. It's about showing them you're not prey anymore. Delia took a deep breath, then stepped out onto a rocky outcropping where the entire pack could see her. She was in human form, deliberately vulnerable, wearing the simple clothes Patty had brought her weeks ago. Behind her, the 3 guardians arranged themselves in a protective formation. The pack went silent. "I'm here," Delia called down. "What justice are you offering?" "The same justice that beat me daily for 19 years. The justice that declared me worthless because my wolf slept longer than yours." "That justice? You broke our laws?" Quentin replied, his tone almost reasonable. "You harbored rogues, stole pack resources, abandoned your duties. These crimes carry a death sentence. You know this. I saved 3 dying pups," Delia countered. "Pups your patrols walked past without a second glance. Is mercy a crime now?" "Mercy." Josephine's laugh rang out. "You stole food from pack stores to feed strays. You lied about your whereabouts. You manipulated Patty into helping you. That's not mercy. That's betrayal. Patty helped me because she knew what you did to her 20 years ago." Delia's voice cracked. "Because she remembered what it feels like to be Omega, in a pack that treats weakness like a disease to be eradicated." Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. Some looked uncomfortable, others angry, but none of them moved to defend her. None of them ever had. Quentin raised his muzzle, silencing the pack. "You've said your piece. Now come down and face judgment. If you surrender peacefully, your death will be quick, clean. Continue this defiance, and Linwood has permission to make you suffer before the end." "I'm not surrendering," Delia said quietly, "and I'm not coming down. This mountain is mine now. I've claimed it by the old rights. If you want me, you'll have to come up here and take me." The Alpha's eyes narrowed. "You dare claim territory? You, an Omega who couldn't shift until 2 months ago. You're not a pack, you're a rogue with delusions. Then it should be easy for you to prove that." Delia forced steel into her voice. "Challenge me. alpha to alpha. Winner takes the mountain and the loser leaves forever. The entire pack erupted into chaos, wolves barking in disbelief, laughing at the audacity, howling at the insult. An omega challenging an alpha. It was unthinkable, absurd. Quentin should have laughed, should have dismissed her out of hand. Instead, his gaze sharpened, fixing on the three guardians behind her. Dia saw the moment he recognized them as something other than normal wolves. Saw calculation replace contempt. "You know what they are," Dia said. "Don't you?" "Old stories," Quentin said carefully. "Legends about guardians, who would wake when the packs forgot their purpose. But those are just tales to frighten pups. Are they?" Delia gestured to the guardians. "These three were dying in a ditch on your territory. Your patrols saw them and did nothing. Because they were weak. Because they weren't pack. Because mercy isn't profitable in your natural order. They're rogues. They're proof that your way is broken." Delia's voice rang out across the valley. "You've built your power on crushing anyone who doesn't fit your definition of strong. You exile the weak, punish the different, destroy anything that threatens your authority. And you call it natural order, call it necessary, but it's just cruelty dressed up in tradition." Silence fell. Even Linwood had stopped laughing. "The old laws say any wolf can challenge for territory," Delia continued. "They don't specify rank or bloodline, just strength and will. So, I'm challenging you, Quentin Carlson. Fight me for this mountain. Prove that might makes right. Or admit that your natural order is so fragile it can't withstand one omega with the courage to say no." For a long moment, the alpha simply stared at her. Delia could see him weighing options, calculating risks. If he refused, he'd look weak. But if he accepted and somehow lost to an omega, even an omega backed by supernatural guardians, his authority would be shattered. "Your courage is admirable," Quentin finally said. "Foolish, but admirable. Very well, I accept your challenge. But know this. I've killed challengers stronger than you. Faster than you, more experienced than you. You'll die on this mountain, Delia Sims. And when you do, those guardians will be mine to command." "They belong to no one," Delia replied. "They choose their own path. Just like I do now." The alpha began his ascent. The pack followed at a distance, positioning themselves to watch the spectacle. Delia retreated into the cave system, leading Quentin to a wide chamber. She prepared a natural arena with smooth stone floor and high ceiling. The perfect place for a battle that would decide everything. Quentin entered in wolf form, his gray fur bristling with power. He was twice her size, 3 times her experience, and surrounded by an aura of dominance that made Delia's wolf whimper instinctively. But she didn't let herself shift yet. Didn't let the fear show. "Last chance," Quentin said. "Submit, I'll make it quick." "No, then you die as you lived. Stubborn and stupid." He lunged with speed. That shouldn't have been possible for something so large. Delia shifted mid-dodge, her transformation so smooth it felt like breathing. She was smaller, faster, and she knew this terrain in ways Quentin never could. The mountain was her ally now, and she was done being prey. If Dia's challenge moved you, if you've ever wanted to stand up to someone who said you weren't enough, please smash the like button. Chapter 7. Proving Worth in Blood. Though Alpha's jaws snapped shut inches from Delia's throat, she twisted away, her smaller size, letting her slip beneath his guard. Her teeth found his front leg not a killing blow, but enough to draw blood and make him stumble. Quentin roared, the sound echoing through the chamber, until the very stone seemed to vibrate. He spun faster than anything his size should move, his massive paw catching Dia's ribs and sending her tumbling across the smooth floor. Pain exploded through her chest. She felt something crack, maybe break, but she forced herself up anyway. The guardians watched from the chamber's edge, their golden eyes tracking every movement. They wouldn't intervene. This was her fight. Her chance to prove she was more than what the pack had made her. "You're fast," Quentin acknowledged, circling her. faster than I expected. But speed won't save you, little Omega. I've crushed dozens of challenges. You're just another corpse in waiting. He attacked again, this time feinting left before driving right. Delia barely dodged, his fangs grazing her shoulder, blood welled hot and red, matting her gray fur. The alpha was toying with her, testing her, waiting for her to exhaust herself before delivering the killing blow. It was the strategy of someone who'd won so many times he couldn't imagine losing. Delia needed to change that calculation. She retreated deeper into the chamber, drawing Quentin away from the entrance. The floor here was uneven, worn smooth in some places and jagged in others. She'd spent 3 days memorizing every dip and rise, every loose stone and stable foothold. Quentin followed confidently, his massive form radiating certainty. He didn't know this terrain. Didn't know that 3 steps ahead, there was a depression in the stone that caught rainwater from the ceiling's cracks, making the surface treacherously slick. Delia leaped over it. Quentin didn't. His front paws hit the wet stone and slid for just a moment, a heartbeat. The alpha's balance faltered. His weight shifted forward, neck exposed. Delia struck. Her teeth sank into the thick fur at his throat, finding the vulnerable flesh beneath. Not deep enough to kill, but deep enough to make the alpha realize how close he'd come to death. How easily an Omega he dismissed could have ended him. Quentin threw her off with a violent shake, his blood staining her muzzle. He backed away, eyes wide with something Delia had never seen in them before: uncertainty. "You're better than I thought," he admitted, his voice rough. But better won't be enough. He changed tactics. Instead of powerful lunges and overwhelming force, he became methodical, calculated. He drove her toward the chamber walls, cutting off her escape routes, using his size to limit her mobility. Every time Delia tried to circle around him, he was there, blocking, hurting, slowly backing her into a corner. And Delia was tiring. Her ribs screamed with every breath. Her shoulder wound bled steadily, weakening her. The alpha was barely winded. "This is the natural order," Quentin said as he advanced. "The strong survive, the weak perish. You can fight it, rage against it, but you cannot change it. You will always be what you were born to be, lesser." The words hit harder than his claws, because part of Delia still believed them. After 19 years of being told she was worthless, nas broken, wrong, how could she not? She stumbled backward, her hunches hitting the chamber wall. Trapped, the alpha moved in for the kill, his fangs bared in victory. Then Gabriel's voice filled her mind. Not words, but a memory. The drainage ditch. 3 dying pups. A girl who'd been told her entire life that she was nothing, choosing to save them anyway. "You are not lesser." Gabriel's presence wrapped around her like armor. "You are the one who chose mercy when the world demanded cruelty. You are the one who protected the helpless when protection meant losing everything. That is, strength they cannot comprehend." Quentin lunged. Delia dropped flat, letting his momentum carry him over her. She rolled, came up behind him, and struck at his hindquarters, slashing deep into the muscle that powered his attacks. The alpha howled in pain and rage. He spun his massive jaws, aiming for her spine. But Delia was already moving. She used the wall as leverage, leaping upward and over, landing behind him again. "You're right about one thing," Delia panted, circling him. "Now nature has an order, but it's not the one you think. The strong don't always survive. The adaptable do, the ones willing to change, to learn, to see value in what others dismiss as weakness. Philosophy won't save you." Quentin charged, favoring his injured leg, but still terrifyingly fast. Delia didn't dodge this time. She moved forward inside his guard, too close for his powerful jaws to reach. She went for his already injured leg, tearing at the wound until Quentin's leg buckled beneath him. He crashed to the stone floor, his greater mass working against him. Before he could rise, Delia was on his back, her teeth at his throat. The kill position, one bite, one quick tear, and the alpha ruled for 15 years would be dead. The chamber went utterly silent. Even the dripping water seemed to pause. "Do it!" Quentin rasped. "Finish it, that's what I would do." Delia's teeth rested against his jugular. She could feel his pulse racing beneath her fangs. Could end him with barely any effort. Prove she was stronger, prove she deserved to survive. But something Gabriel had shown her echoed through her mind. You are not them. Their cruelty does not have to become yours. Slowly, deliberately, Dia released her grip and stepped back. Quentin rolled to his feet, limping heavily, his eyes full of confusion. Why, you won. The fight is yours. By every law we know, you should kill me. Maybe that's the problem, Delia said, shifting back to human form, despite the pain screaming through her ribs and shoulder. Maybe those laws are exactly why your pack is broken. Kill or be killed. Dominate or submit. No room for anything else. No room for mercy or growth or second chances. She gestured to the guardians who'd remained motionless throughout the fight. They didn't survive because they were the strongest. They survived because I showed them mercy when everyone else walked away. Because I chose to see value in something weak and dying. And that choice, that mercy made me stronger than I ever was in your pack. Quentin stared at her, blood dripping from his wounds. Around them, the chamber walls seemed to pulse with golden light, the mountain itself bearing witness. You're letting me live, he said slowly, as if the concept was foreign. After everything I've done, everything I've allowed to happen to you. I'm letting you live because killing you won't fix what's broken, Delia replied. It'll just make me another alpha who rules through fear, and I refuse to become what you are. She met his eyes, no longer the submissive Omega who couldn't hold a superior's gaze, but an equal who'd earned her place through blood and courage and impossible choices. The mountain is mine, she continued, by right of challenge and by the old laws you invoked. You and your pack will leave this territory and not return, and you'll release Patty from the pack without punishment. She helped me because she saw what you've become, what you've always been. Someone has to stand against that. And if I refuse, Quentin asked, though his tone said he already knew the answer, then I'll challenge you again, and next time I won't show mercy. Delia's voice was still wrapped in silk, because next time you'll have proven you can't learn, can't change, and mercy wasted on those who won't grow is just enabling cruelty. For a long moment, the alpha simply looked at her, then he shifted back to human form. A tall man in his 40s with gray hair and scars that spoke of countless battles. He limped toward the chamber exit, his wounded leg barely supporting his weight. At the threshold, he paused. You're wrong about the natural order, but perhaps I was too. He glanced back, his expression unreadable. The pack will leave. Patty will be released. You have my word. As Alpha, former Alpha, one of the guardians, Dusty growled. The first time any of them had spoken in the presence of outsiders. Quentin flinched, but nodded. Former Alpha of this territory, at least. He looked at Dia one last time. You'll face other challenges, stronger ones. Not every wolf will accept what you've done here. Let them come, Dia said quietly. I'm not afraid anymore. Quentin left, his form disappearing into the passage that led to the valley. Moments later, Delia heard the howls of the pack as they were ordered to retreat. The sound of 40 wolves withdrawing from her mountain echoed through the stone. She'd won. Impossibly, unbelievably, she'd won. The moment they were gone, Delia's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the cold stone, her human form naked and bleeding and shaking with exhaustion. The guardian surrounded her immediately, Morgan's healing warmth flooding through her broken ribs, Gabriel's presence soothing her shredded nerves, Dusty's solid bulk keeping her upright. I did it, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. We did it. Through their bond, she felt their pride, their joy, their absolute certainty that this had always been her destiny. Not to be the pack's victim, but to be the one who showed them a better way. She'd been rejected, exiled, hunted, declared worthless, and sentenced to death. But she'd survived, and in surviving, she'd become something the pack had never allowed her to be. Herself, free, powerful, unbroken, and this was only the beginning. Chapter 8, 25 Years of Peace. The years passed like water over stone, slowly reshaping everything. Dia's mountain became a sanctuary for the rejected. Word spread through the territories about the Omega, who defeated an Alpha, about the ancient guardians who'd chosen her, about a place where wolves could find refuge regardless of rank or bloodline. They came in ones and twos at first. A young wolf named Eric Alvarado, cast out for refusing to execute a rogue who'd strayed onto his pack's territory by accident. An elderly female, Jami May, deemed too old to be useful and left to die in the wilderness. A pair of Alicent twins, Nathaniel and Vince, whose parents had been killed in a territorial dispute, and who had nowhere else to go. Dia took them all in, fed them, healed them with Morgan's help, trained them with Dusty's guidance, showed them that pack didn't mean hierarchy and cruelty. It meant family built on choice and mutual respect. Her mountain pack grew to 20 wolves within 5 years, 50 within 10. By year 15, they numbered over 100, and Dilea had transformed from the frightened Omega who could barely shift into a leader whose name was spoken with respect and fear. Across 6 territories, the Guardians grew alongside her. They'd been pups when she found them, but as decades passed, their true nature became impossible to ignore. They aged differently than normal wolves, their power deepening rather than fading. Gabriel developed abilities beyond healing the bond he could see through time, glimpsing possible futures and guiding Delia away from danger. Morgan's healing expanded to affect not just physical wounds, but the deep psychological scars that so many refugees carried. And Dusty became a warrior of legendary skill, training Delia's fighters until they could stand against any pack's enforcers. But the Guardians' most precious gift was simpler. They loved her unconditionally, eternally. In a world that had told her she was worthless, they saw her value every single day. Delia herself changed in ways she'd never imagined. Her wolf, once small and weak, had grown powerful through constant use and the Guardian's influence. She stood nearly as large as Quentin had been. Her gray fur shot through with streaks of silver that caught the light like starshine. Her shifts were instantaneous. Her senses were sharp enough to track a specific wolf scent through a rainstorm across 5 miles. She was everything the pack had said she could never be, and she'd achieved it by rejecting everything they'd taught her. Other packs noticed. Some sent ambassadors seeking alliances. Others sent challenges, convinced that an Omega Alpha was an affront to the natural order that needed correcting. Dia met them all with the same steady resolve. Those who came in peace found sanctuary. Those who came with violence found Dusty and an army of wolves who'd learned to fight not for dominance but for protection of their chosen family. Quentin's pack, now led by his daughter after he died in a border skirmish 8 years prior, kept their distance. They'd honored the former Alpha's word, never encroaching on Dia's territory, never harassing her refugees. A cold peace, but peace nonetheless. Josephine, ironically, had become one of Delia's most unexpected allies. The Beta's daughter had challenged for leadership 3 years after Quentin's defeat, won brutally, and then changed. She'd reached out to Dilea through intermediaries, requesting a meeting. When they'd finally spoken, Josephine had been blunt. "I was cruel to you. Inexcusably cruel because I was taught that cruelty to the weak proved strength. I was wrong. And I'm trying to build something better." They weren't friends, would never be friends. But they'd forged a mutual understanding, and 2 females trying to reshape a system designed to crush them, each in their own way. Patty had joined Delia's pack after her release, living peacefully in a cottage Delia had built for her near the main settlement. The older woman served as an advisor and grandmother figure to the young wolves who arrived traumatized and lost. She died quietly in her sleep 5 years ago, surrounded by people who loved her a far better end than she'd feared during her time as Omega. Linwood had challenged Josephine's leadership twice. He'd lost both times and finally been exiled for attempting to poison her. Rumor said he'd joined a rogue pack that raided unprotected territories, but Delia had never confirmed it. She hoped distantly that he'd found whatever peace someone that damaged could manage. By year 23, Delia's mountain pack had become a force that even the strongest traditional packs respected. They didn't conquer territory, didn't raid or pillage, but they stood as proof that another way was possible, that wolves could thrive without crushing each other in endless power struggles. Delia had built something that would outlast her, something worth protecting, which made the day everything fell apart so much worse. It started with Gabriel. He'd been acting strangely for weeks, staring into distances Delia couldn't see, whimpering in his sleeps, pressing against her with desperate urgency. Through their bond, she felt fragments of what he saw. Darkness spreading across territories, wolves turning on each other with mindless rage, and at the center of it all, something ancient and hungry. "What is it?" Delia asked him one evening as they sat on the ridge overlooking her territory. "What are you seeing?" Gabriel showed her an image that made her blood run cold. Herself standing in a stone chamber surrounded by corpses, and behind her 3 figures wreathed in shadow reaching toward the guardians with grasping hands. "Who are they?" Delia demanded, but Gabriel couldn't or wouldn't show her more. He simply pressed closer, his fear bleeding through their bond in waves. 2 days later, Josephine arrived at the mountain with a dozen warriors at her back. She looked haggarded, older than her 41 years, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "We need to talk," Josephine said without preamble. "About the murders." Delia's stomach dropped. "What murders?" "You haven't heard." Josephine looked genuinely surprised. 3 packs in the southern territories. All of their alphas killed in the same way, throats torn out, bodies arranged in ritual patterns. The pack councils are calling emergency sessions. Everyone's accusing everyone else. "What does this have to do with me?" Josephine met her eyes. All 3 alphas were killed with claws that match your measurements exactly. And witnesses saw a gay wolf with silver streaks leaving each territory right after the bodies were discovered. The world seemed to tilt. "That's impossible. I've been here. My entire pack can confirm." "I know," Josephine interrupted. "I believe you. But the other packs don't. They're saying you've gone rogue, that you're killing alphas who won't submit to your authority, that the guardians have corrupted you." She paused. "There's going to be a trial, Delia, a gathering of all pack alphas, and they're going to demand your execution for crimes against wolf law." "A trial?" Delia felt rage building beneath her shock. "They're framing me for murders I didn't commit, and their solution is another tribunal." "The alternative is war," Josephine said flatly. "Every pack united against yours. Hundreds of warriors descending on this mountain to tear down everything you've built. The trial is the only chance to prove your innocence. And if I can't prove it," Josephine's silence was answer enough. That night, Delia called a gathering of her entire pack. Over 100 wolves assembled in the main clearing, their faces reflecting confusion and fear. She'd protected them for decades. Now she had to ask them to trust her one more time. "You've all heard the accusations," Dia said, standing before them in human form with the 3 guardians flanking her. "I swear to you by everything we've built together, I didn't kill those alphas. Someone is framing me, using my appearance to turn the packs against us." "Who would do that?" Eric called out. He was middle-aged now, one of her first refugees, a wolf who'd become her most trusted advisor. "I don't know, but Gabriel's been seeing visions of something dark coming. Something that wants to destroy what we've built here." Dia looked out over her pack, her family. "I have to attend this trial. Have to face these accusations and prove my innocence." But I need you all to stay here, protect the mountain, keep our home safe. Let us come with you, Vince argued. His twin Nathaniel nodded agreement. You shouldn't face this alone. I won't be alone. Delia rested her hand on Gabriel's head. I'll have the guardians, and I need you here more. If this is a trap, if someone's trying to draw me away from the mountain to attack while I'm gone, you're the only defense our home has. The pack murmured uneasily. But they understood. Everything they'd built was at risk. Everyone they'd saved depended on the mountain's protection. When do you leave? Jamie asked. The elderly female had been with Delia for over 20 years. One of her staunchest supporters. Tomorrow, Josephine answered for her. The trial is in 3 days. At the old ceremonial grounds on neutral territory, Dia has to arrive before dusk on the 3rd day, or the Pax will declare her guilty by default. 3 days. Delia had 3 days to travel across hostile territory, appear before a council of alphas who already believed her guilty, and somehow prove her innocence of crimes she hadn't committed. And if she failed, she'd face execution again. Only this time, she wouldn't just be losing her own life. She'd be condemning everyone who'd trusted her, everyone who'd found sanctuary on her mountain to whatever fate the unified Pax decided. 25 years of peace, 25 years of building something better, and it could all end in 3 days. Chapter 9. Condemned by Lies. The ceremonial grounds sat at the convergence of 7 territories, neutral land that no pack could claim, sanctified by treaties older than living memory. Massive standing stones formed a circle large enough to hold hundreds of wolves, their surfaces carved with the same ancient symbols Delia had activated on her mountain altar all those years ago. She arrived at sunset on the 3rd day, exhausted from the journey and sick with dread. The guardians walked beside her in formation, Gabriel on her left, Morgan on her right, Dusty trailing behind. Their presence drew stares from the assembled packs, hundreds of wolves who'd gathered to witness what many believed would be her execution. In the circle center stood 12 alphas, representing the most powerful packs in the region. Josephine was among them. Looking grim, the others regarded Dia with expressions ranging from contempt to cold calculation. At the head of the council sat an ancient female named Antoinette Scott. Her white fur streaked with gray, her eyes sharp despite her advanced age. She was the eldest alpha ruler of a northern pack that predated most modern territories. Delia Sims, Antoinette's voice carried across the grounds without effort. You stand accused of murdering 3 alphas. Danilo Ramos of the Riverbend pack, Pascal Browning of the Ironwood pack, and Marcelino Gibbs of the Shadow Fin pack. Each was killed in identical fashion, throat torn, body positioned ritually, killed during the dark moon. Witnesses place a wolf matching your description at each scene. She paused. How do you answer these charges? Not guilty, Delia said clearly. I didn't kill anyone. I've been on my mountain the entire time, surrounded by over 100 witnesses who can confirm my presence. Witnesses from your own pack. One of the alphas sneered a scarred male named Ismael Calderon. Wolves loyal to you who'd lie to protect their alpha. Their testimony is worthless. Then what testimony would you accept? Delia demanded. You've already decided I'm guilty. This trial is just theater before you carry out a sentence you determined weeks ago. Careful, Omega, Ismael growled. You're addressing your betters. I'm addressing wolves who should know better. Delia shot back. I've spent 25 years building a sanctuary for refugees from your packs. Wolves you cast out, beat down, or left to die. And now you want to believe I've suddenly become a murderer. What possible reason would I have to kill 3 alphas I'd never even met? Power? Another alpha suggested. The same reason anyone kills. You want to expand your territory. Eliminate rivals. Your mountain pack has grown too large, too influential. Perhaps you've decided it's time to challenge the traditional order. I've never wanted to challenge anything. Delia's frustration boiled over. All I've ever wanted was to be left alone, to provide safety for wolves who had nowhere else to go. If I wanted power over other packs, I've had 25 years to take it. Perhaps, Antoinette said thoughtfully. Or perhaps something has changed. The guardians you harbor, they're not normal wolves. Their power grows with each passing year. Who's to say they haven't corrupted you, twisted your purpose toward darker ends? The accusation hit like a physical blow. Delia felt the guardians tense beside her, felt their outrage bleeding through their bonds. The guardians have never corrupted anyone, Delia said coldly. They've healed the broken, trained the weak, and protected the vulnerable. Everything good about my pack exists because of them. Then let them speak for themselves, Ismail challenged. Let these ancient creatures tell us what they truly are, what they truly want. Gabriel stepped forward, his dark eyes sweeping across the assembled alphas. When he spoke, his voice resonated with power that made the standing stones themselves seem to vibrate. We are the first pack's legacy, born from the ancient magic that gave wolves their forms and their bonds. We sleep between ages, waking when the packs forget their purpose. When hierarchy replaces community, when strength becomes cruelty, when mercy is punished as weakness, his gaze fixed on Ismail. We woke because a young wolf chose to save 3 dying creatures, despite knowing it would cost her everything. Because in that moment, she embodied what packs were meant to be, family that protects rather than systems that destroy. Pretty words, Ismail spat, but they don't change the facts. 3 alphas are dead, all killed by a wolf matching Delia's description. Someone with her size, her coloring, her scent. My scent? Delia interrupted. The witnesses could identify my specific scent, Ismail faltered. Well, similar scent. Gray wolf with silver streaks. The description matches. There are hundreds of gray wolves with silver fur, Josephine interjected. It's not exactly unique. And if the witnesses could truly identify Dia's specific scent, they'd know that she hasn't left her mountain in 6 months. Her scent has been nowhere near those territories. Unless she's learned to mask it, another alpha suggested. The guardians have strange powers. Who knows what else they've taught her? The accusations kept coming, each more absurd than the last. Delia stood in the center of that hostile circle, feeling the weight of centuries of prejudice pressing down on her. They didn't want truth. They wanted a villain, someone to blame for the murders that threatened their fragile peace, and an Omega who dared to become Alpha. She was the perfect scapegoat. Enough, Antoinette finally said, silencing the council. We could debate possibilities all night. The question is evidence. Do we have any actual proof that Delia committed these murders? Not speculation, not suspicion, proof. Silence fell. The alphas glanced at each other, and Delia felt a flicker of hope. They had nothing. Just witness descriptions that could match dozens of wolves, and a convenient target they'd always resented. Then, a new voice spoke from the edge of the circle. I have proof. Everyone turned. A figure emerged from the crowd. A wolf in human form, cloaked and hooded. When he lowered the hood, Dia's blood turned to ice. Linwood. He looked older, harder, his face carved with scars from whatever violent life he'd led since his exile. But his eyes still burned with the same hatred they'd held 25 years ago, when he'd hunted her through the forest. Linwood Dalton, Antoinette acknowledged, former enforcer of Josephine's pack. You claim to have evidence. I do. Linwood pulled something from his cloak, a piece of fabric stained with blood. This was found at the Shadowfen murder scene. It's torn from a blanket that came from Dia's mountain. I recognize the weaving pattern. It's unique to her pack. Delia's heart sank. She did recognize it. They used that pattern for blankets given to new refugees. But how had it ended up at a murder scene? This proves nothing, Josephine argued. Those blankets are given to wolves who leave the mountain. Anyone could have one. True, Linwood agreed smoothly. But combined with the witness descriptions and the ritual nature of the killings which match ancient ceremonies, the Guardians would know it creates a compelling pattern. "You're the one who committed these murders," Delia said suddenly, the pieces clicking together. "You killed those alphas and framed me. This whole thing is revenge for your exile. Prove it." Linwood smiled. "You have no evidence. So I have witnesses, physical proof, and a clear motive for you: expansion of your territory and elimination of rivals, while I'm just a former enforcer with no pack, no power, no reason to risk my life killing alphas." It was a perfect trap. Linwood had spent years planning this, waiting for the right moment to destroy her, and she had no way to prove his guilt without the same evidence he'd manufactured against her. "The council will deliberate," Antoinette announced Delia Sims. "You and your guardians will remain here under guard while we decide your fate." "How long will that take?" Delia asked, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. "As long as necessary." Antoinette's expression was unreadable. Justice cannot be rushed. They took Delia to a hollow beneath the standing stones, not quite a prison, but guarded by a dozen warriors who made clear she wasn't free to leave. The Guardians stayed with her, their bodies pressed close. Their presence the only comfort in the nightmare her life had become. Through their bonds, Delia felt their fear, not for themselves, but for her. For what would happen if the council decided she was guilty? "There has to be a way out of this," Delia whispered. "Gabriel, you can see futures. What happens? How does this end?" Gabriel's response came heavy with sorrow. "I see many endings. In most you die, but in a few, a precious few, you survive by making a choice that costs everything." What choice? But Gabriel couldn't or wouldn't show her. The future was too tangled, too dependent on variables she couldn't control. Above them, the council deliberated through the night. Voices rose and fell, arguments escalating into shouted accusations. The Pacts wanted blood, wanted closure, wanted someone to pay for the murders that had shattered their sense of safety. As dawn broke, Antoinette emerged from the council chamber. Her expression was carved from stone, giving nothing away. "The council has reached a decision," she announced, her voice carrying across the ceremonial grounds. "Dia Sims, by vote of 9-3, you have been found guilty of the murder of 3 alphas. The sentence is death by execution." To be carried out immediately, the world seemed to stop. Delia heard nothing but the rushing of blood in her ears. Felt nothing but the Guardians' desperate howls echoing through their bonds. After 25 years of building something better, after saving hundreds of lives and proving that mercy was stronger than cruelty, she was going to die for crime. She didn't commit, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Chapter 10. Mercy's Final Victory. They brought her to the execution post at sunrise. Delia stood in human form, her hands bound behind her with silver chains that burned against her skins. The Guardians had been separated from her, held at the circle's edge by 20 warriors each. Through their bonds, she felt their rage, their desperation, their absolute refusal to accept this ending. But what could they do? If they attacked, they'd be slaughtered. The assembled packs numbered in the hundreds. Even the Guardians' ancient power couldn't overcome those odds. Antoinette approached, her white fur gleaming in the dawn light. "Do you have any last words, Diems?" Dia looked out at the sea of wolves. Some watched with satisfaction, others with discomfort. A few, including Josephine, with open grief. "I didn't kill those alphas," Dia said, her voice carrying across the grounds. "And when the real murderer strikes again after I'm dead, I hope you remember this moment. Remember that you chose convenience over truth, revenge over justice, that you killed someone who only ever tried to protect the wolves you threw away." "Touching," Linwood called from the crowd, "but irrelevant. Justice is being served." Antoinette raised her clawed hand, signaling the executioner a massive enforcer named Tyrell Melendez, who'd killed rogues for 30 years without hesitation. "Wait!" A voice rang out, sharp and desperate. Everyone turned. A young wolf pushed through the crowd, barely more than a teenager, his clothes torn and muddy, his face pale with fear and exhaustion. "I have information," he gasped. "About the murders?" "About who really killed them. Who are you?" Antoinette demanded. "Joseph McLaughlin. I was part of Linwood's rogue pack." The young wolf flinched when Linwood's gaze locked onto him. "Hell kill me for this, but I can't let an innocent wolf die." "This boy is delusional," Linwood said, smoothly. "Probably drugged. Don't listen to." "I have proof," Joseph shouted. He pulled something from his shirt. A knife with a distinctive carved handle. "This is the blade used to arrange the bodies in those ritual patterns. Linwood kept it as a trophy. I stole it before I ran." Antoinette took the knife, examining it carefully. Her expression darkened. "This is ceremonial silver, rare. Very specific craftsmanship." She looked at Linwood. "How did this boy come to possess it?" "He's lying. Trying to frame me to save his pathetic life." "I'm not lying." Joseph's voice cracked. "Linwood has been planning this for years, ever since Josephine exiled him. He joined the rogue pack in the Southern Territories and recruited wolves who hated Delea's mountain, who thought she was disrupting the natural order. They believed if they killed enough alphas and framed her for it, the packs would unite to destroy her and everything she built." "Ridiculous," Linwood spat. "Why would I care what happens to an Omega who—" "Because she defeated you," Joseph interrupted. 25 years ago. You hunted her, and she escaped. You told everyone in the rogue pack how it haunted you, how an Omega making a fool of you destroyed your reputation, how you dreamed of watching her die knowing there was nothing she could do to stop it." Silence fell across the ceremonial grounds. Every wolf present understood that kind of hatred, the obsessive need for revenge that could consume a warrior's entire life. Antoinette's eyes narrowed. "Linwood Dalton, do you deny these accusations?" "Of course, I deny them. This boy is obviously." "Then you won't mind submitting to a truth-binding ceremony," Antoinette said coldly. "Ancient magic that compels honest answers. If you're innocent, you have nothing to fear." Linwood's face went pale. For just a moment, his mask of control slipped, revealing the rage and hatred beneath. Then he made his choice. He shifted mid-lunge, his wolf form exploding from his human skin as he aimed straight for Delea. His jaws opened wide, going for her throat. If he couldn't frame her, he'd kill her himself. But he never reached her. Dusty materialized between them like smoke made solid. The Guardian was twice Linwood's size now, his black fur rippling with golden light. His jaws closed around Linwood's throat with terrible finality. No, Linwood's dying gurgle was barely audible. "No, she doesn't deserve worthless. Omega should have died in that ditch." His body went limp. Dusty dropped the corpse and returned to Delea's side, blood staining his muzzle. The ceremonial grounds erupted into chaos. Wolves howling, alphas shouting, warriors drawing weapons. But Antoinette's voice cut through it all like a blade. Silence. Everyone froze. "The guilty party has revealed himself through action," Antoinette declared. "An innocent wolf would have submitted to truth-binding. This tax confirms Joseph's testimony." She turned to Delia. "Release her immediately." The silver chains fell away, leaving burns on Delia's wrists that Morgan immediately began healing with gentle licks. The Guardians surrounded her, their bodies trembling with relief and residual rage. "I apologize," Antoinette said formally. "Justice was nearly perverted here. You are innocent of all charges and free to return to your mountain." Delia wanted to rage at her, wanted to scream about how close they'd come to killing an innocent wolf, but she was too exhausted, too emotionally wrung out to do anything but nod. Josephine pushed through the crowd and pulled Delia into a fierce embrace. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have fought harder for you. Should have trusted my instincts that something was wrong." "You tried," Delia managed. "That's more than most." The other alphas were already dispersing, uncomfortable with how close they'd come to judicial murder. But a few approached Delia before leaving, offering awkward apologies, expressing admiration for her composure, suggesting alliances now that her innocence was proven. Delia accepted their words with weary grace. She'd survived. That was all that mattered. As the ceremonial grounds emptied, Joseph approached hesitantly. He was young, maybe 19, the same age Dia had been when she'd found the gardens. His eyes held the same haunted look she remembered from her own reflection. "Thank you," Delia said quietly. "You saved my life." "You saved mine first," Joseph replied. 3 years ago, I wandered onto your mountain, half dead from starvation. Your wolves fed me, healed me, sent me on my way with supplies. You didn't know me, didn't owe me anything. But you helped anyway." He swallowed hard. "When I heard what Linwood was planning, I knew I had to do something, had to repay the mercy you showed me." Delia felt tears burning her eyes. This was why she'd built her sanctuary, why she'd protected refugees and outcasts for 25 years. Because mercy rippled outward in ways you could never predict. Because choosing kindness, even when it cost you, created threads of connection that could save your life years later. "Come back to the mountain," Delia offered. "You'll need protection. Linwood's rogue pack will want revenge for exposing them." Joseph's face lit with desperate hope. "You'd take me after I ran with his pack." "You were surviving however you could," Delia said simply. "And when it mattered, you chose truth over safety. That makes you pack. If you want to be, I want to be," Joseph whispered. More than anything, the journey back to the mountain took 3 days. Delia traveled with the guardians, Joseph and Josephine, who'd insisted on escorting them personally to ensure no further attacks. They moved through territories that had been hostile days ago, but now watched them pass with cautious respect. Word had spread fast. The Omega Alpha had been falsely accused and nearly executed, had faced death with dignity, had been saved by mercy she'd shown years ago, coming back to protect her. Stories like that became legends, and legends changed how wolves saw the world. When they finally reached her mountain's base, Dia felt the familiar pulse of the Terato's bond welcoming her home. Above, she could see her pack gathered on the ridges, over 100 wolves who'd been waiting. Terrified that they'd lost their alpha forever. They howled when they saw her, a sound of pure joy and relief that echoed across the valleys. Delia howled back, and the guardians joined her, their voices harmonizing with hers in a song of survival and triumph and unbreakable bonds. She climbed the familiar paths with her family around her, and when she reached the main settlement, her wolves surrounded her in a crushing mass of fur and bodies and love. They'd built this together, this sanctuary. This proof that another way was possible, and it had survived. They'd all survived. That night, Delia stood on the ridge, overlooking her territory with the 3 guardians beside her. Gabriel pressed against her left side, Morgan against her right, Dusty at her back, the same formation they'd held 25 years ago, when she'd been a terrified girl fleeing execution. "You saw this," Delia said to Gabriel, "didn't you? In your visions, you knew I'd face death row and be saved." Gabriel's response came warm with affection. "I saw possibilities. The future is never certain. But I knew that if you stayed true to yourself, if you kept choosing mercy over cruelty, the threads you'd woven would catch you when you fell." "What now?" Delia asked. "What comes next?" Through their bond, Gabriel showed her glimpses of the future. More refugees arriving. Alliances forming with packs willing to change. Young wolves trained in new ways, spreading across territories, carrying the lessons they'd learned on her mountain. A slow revolution built on kindness rather than conquest. It wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more wolves who clung to the old ways. But change had begun. The seed she'd planted 25 years ago when she'd chosen to save 3 dying pups instead of walking away was finally bearing fruit. "We changed the world," Delia whispered, tears streaming down her face, "just by choosing to be kind, just by refusing to become what they tried to make us. The Gartrians pressed closer, their warmth surrounding her. Through their bonds, she felt their absolute certainty. She'd always been exactly who she was meant to be, not in spite of being rejected and cast out, but because of it. Because only someone who'd experienced the worst of pack hierarchy could envision something better. Only someone who'd been called worthless could see the value. In wolves, everyone else dismissed. Only someone who'd chosen mercy when cruelty would have been easier could build a sanctuary that lasted 25 years and would last 100 more. Dia had been rejected, exiled, sentenced to death twice. But she'd survived it all, because 25 years ago she'd made one simple choice: to save 3 dying pups when she had every reason to walk away. And those 3 pups had saved her right back. Not just from the executioner's blade, but from becoming someone who believed the lies. Someone who accepted that she was worthless. Someone who let the world's cruelty make her cruel in return. They'd saved her by showing her who she really was. Strong enough to be kind, brave enough to be merciful, powerful enough to change everything. And that was the greatest gift anyone had ever given her. The moon rose over the mountain, bathing everything in silver light. Delia howled not in sorrow or fear, but in triumph, in joy, in the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. And 3 ancient guardians howled with her, their voices carrying across territories, telling the world that mercy had won, that the rejected Omega, who'd taken in 3 homeless pups, had become someone who couldn't be destroyed. Because she'd learned the greatest truth of all: you save who you can, love who you're given, and trust that kindness creates threads strong enough to catch you when the world tries to break you. And sometimes, just sometimes, those threads become unbreakable chains that nothing can sever, not even death itself. Dear viewers, as we reach the end of Delia's journey, I'm left with these questions. Who in your life saw value in you when everyone else said you were worthless? And have you ever shown kindness to someone when the world told you they weren't worth it? Sometimes the smallest acts of mercy echo across decades, coming back to save us when we need it most. Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how compassion has shaped your life. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video. Your support helps keep these stories alive and helps others discover the power of choosing kindness, even when it costs everything.